If your mix sounds great in your room, but terrible outside, anywhere else you listen to it, this is absolutely going to help you. The first thing you need to know for this, understand that the human body is so resilient, because this affects why you're hearing the way you are. If you were to wear a pair of glasses that were yellow tinted glasses, the world would appear weird at first, but after enough time wearing them, you would forget what reality looked like. This is exactly what's going on with your mix with your ears. Your ears get used to whatever you do. So if you boost a ton of 50 hertz and you get used to listening to your mix with way too much 50 hertz, as soon as you go to take it away while you're mixing and you do an A and B, like which is better, you're always going to pick the one that had more 50 hertz because you got used to listening that way. The only way you can actually know what will work out of your room, out of that moment, is if you have a real world reference point. Real world meaning a song that was mixed and you know sounds good to you wherever you listen to it. That's your reference. So depending on the genre, you may need a few different references depending on what's going on. But I've gotten away with using studio recorded stuff as references for live recording, mixing a live recording. Like there's a lot of leeway because it's mostly about the big things. It's about how tight is the low end? How much low end is there? How bright is it? How much low mids is there? How muddy is it in the low mids, or is it scooped? It's about big things like that. It's not, when it comes to mixing translation, it's not usually about the little things. See, I use references for a number of reasons. Sometimes you might use a reference because you really like a snare sound in a particular song, so I'll focus on just the snare and try to capture that within a mix. So that's a specific detailed reference. What I'm actually talking about is a different kind of reference altogether. The broad scope reference. That's the one you need if you're trying to make your mix translate. So let me give you a good example, right? Just like the tinted glasses thing we said, what people do so often that's wrong is if you start your mix with a lot of EQ on your mix bus, you will get used to hearing the mix that way. And then no matter what you do to try to remove it, your ears are always going to fight you because they're used to it. So they're going to say, no, don't take out the low mids. I miss the low mids now. Everything sounds less powerful. I can't take it away. Without the reference, you would guess wrong every time because your body is so resilient that it's going to fight you. It gets used to whatever it's living in. So if you're living in a place that has too much high end, if you had somebody else master your track or mix it or whatever, and they send you a version that has the right amount, sitting within your room, it's going to sound bad to you because you're used to hearing all that high end. It's going to sound dark. But that is probably right. The reference is so critical to understanding right and wrong. And here's a tip I find for references. So the first tip I gave you, right? Don't start with crazy EQ. When I was working in a hybrid workflow, I was able to get away with so much more in terms of, I don't know what it was. It was just a symptom of the gear, driving into it. It was more forgiving. So I could do way more EQ. So when people tell you and they're giving you tips on how to mix, if you mix solely in the box, you can't really listen to an analog mixing tip and take it to heart completely. You have to always sort of translate it for what you do. And what I found was I can't get away with what I used to do hybrid in the box. If I were to boost a bunch of 50 hertz and a bunch of 8K or 12K and up in the analog world, like I say a bunch, what does that mean? Several dB, many dB, and start mixing into it. When I was mixing hybrid, I could always get away with it because there was something about the way the compression would sort of chomp it and the way the converter would smash it. And, it just sort of did a thing that was always sounding okay. Whereas in the box, what I found is every time I start with EQ on and I crank it up, it always goes bad. So what I found is using my favorite EQ at the moment, and you could use any of them. I've gone through phases of using all of them, but literally, I used to be a Pultac guy, then I was a Manley massive passive guy, now I'm a curve bender guy. So what I like on the curve bender is like it goes in half dB increments. So 1 dB at 50 hertz and 1 or 2 dB at like 20K, and that's it. And sometimes I'll cut 1 or 2 dB at 300 hertz. That's all I'm going to do. So by thinking about it in this way, right, what it allows me to do is make a mix that I can put headphones on. See, this is a second tip. Don't listen to your reference on speakers if you can help it. This is something I found helped for me so much. References in headphones are better when it comes to the broad scope of things because it takes the room completely out of the equation, and you really do get to hear how tight low end is, or how expansive it is, or how it feels within the headphones. In the room, your room could very easily, if you didn't spend a ton on treatment and a room designer and all sorts of stuff, if your speakers are out of phase, there's 100 reasons why in your room you won't be able to get the low end right. Whereas if you have speakers like, headphones like these, I got these Beyer DT770 things, and I also got next to me the Manny Marroquin MM500s. I keep these and the Andrew Sheps, whatever those were called, 7506s. I keep all 3 of these around for checking things because that's just the way I like to work. My main speakers are what I work on most of the time. But for the references, I got to use headphones to make sure that I'm getting as close as I can to the tightness in the low end, for example, and how much scoop in the low mids I should use. Because, like I said, I'm just like all of you. The idea that we just naturally have an understanding of exactly how much low mids every mix should have with no reference point whatsoever, that's not realistic. It's not realistic because, like I said, we get used to whatever. So you take a new song with new instrumentation where the instruments layer over each other in a different way, different tempo, different genre, different problems with the recording. You take all this stuff and add it up, there's going to be movement so much that the idea that you always have a firm understanding of how much low mids should be in a mix, I don't even buy that that's possible. I know people can mix without references, but mainly you can do that if you don't make moves that wind up ruining that potential. For example, if you took the curve bender, set it to 300 and cranked 5 dB or 8 dB, no matter what you do, you'll get used to liking that. You'll try to take it down. It won't sound good. And you'll get out into the world and it'll be low mid mud city. So what I'm saying is we need the reference I throw on a reference, Brendan O'Brien mixes or something, because I love the way he mixes. And I listen to the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Rick Rubin produced, Brendan O'Brien mixed, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. I throw that on and I go, okay, there's low mid scoop. Listen to how tight the bass is. The bass sounds thick and full. And if you go into the car, it doesn't lack. It sounds great through car subs and everything else. So when I listen to that, then I pull up this live thing I'm working on. And what I do is I go, wow, my low end is way too thick compared to this. I got to tighten that up. So I take the bass and I get rid of a bunch of unnecessary super lows because for whatever reason, that bass was like a Thunderdome or bass. I just made that up. It's something. The subs were louder than the entire rest of the bass, and it was just a DI. But it was that specific DI, I think, on a Mark bass. Like that's the way they EQ it or something. It was crazy sounding. They probably do it to make it sound good live, but mixing it was really weird. So as a result, I had to cut a lot of low end. I had to boost a lot of the high end because it's a combination. It's not just the amp. It's the Mark bass combined with the bass the guy was using. He may have had his tone knobs down because that's what he likes. I don't know. But whatever it was, the bass was giving me just mud at the bottom and really no clarity on top. And I didn't realize just how much I had to boost until I used a reference. I was like, wow, I want this bass tighter. So I cut a ton of low end off it. I boosted a ton of some of the mid-range to get the fingers coming out, some 800 to like 1K, 1.3, something like that, and wide and with my eyes closed, cranking the knob until it felt right. Not on a Pro Q3 where I could see exactly the few dB. In fact, I may have used the Pro Q3, but I didn't look at the graph, because that's what people do. They look at the graph. Don't look at the graph. Just ignore the graph. I think there's a mode to get rid of the graph. And then just twist the knob. So I just don't look at the graph and twist the knob. And then I'll look after and go, oh, wow, that's a lot of boost. Doesn't matter. Or it's a lot of cut. Doesn't matter. So by getting rid of a ton of low end and getting rid and adding a ton of that mids, the high mid that I needed out of the bass, all of a sudden we got some clarity. Also, I cut a few dB at 300 hertz because I'm on the Brendan O'Brien mix. It was scooped in the low mids. It was pretty substantially scooped. So I don't know. I didn't scoop mine as much. Again, this is a live recording compared to a studio recording, so it's very different. But at the same time, I felt like it needed it. And I may share this with you guys also. I just can't put everything in this video, so that'll be in the next one. But the point is, use the reference, because without a reference to give you an idea of what should be, you will always pick the boomier, louder, more boosted version in all frequencies, and it's not going to be right. I'm telling you, it will not be right. So that's why I'll use references still, and I don't like them from a point of view of like artistic choices when it comes to the way you want something to sound in terms of like what you're going to feature, like how loud should the guitar be compared to this or that. I don't love it in that sense. That is something that I think when people start using references, that's what they do. They try to use them for volume balance things. To me, that's too personal choice. I use it as a whole, kind of the way like Ozone would analyze a track and then give you just the curve that they like because it's similar to whatever. I look at it from that perspective of what's this general curve doing? And then that's how I'll tweak my mix bus. Once it's really close to being dialed, that's how I'll tweak the mix bus EQ. For me, just on the curve bender and not by a substantial amount. And the reason you can get away with that is because when you mix from jump, you don't put on a substantial amount of anything. Because like I told you, you'll be chasing your tail way more if you do that. Because I can't tell you how many times I would go into a mix thinking I could boost a ton of low end, a ton of high end, some mid range, and then you make your mix. It'll sound, you'll think it's great until you take that off. Just set that back to 0 and then listen to the mix. And you'll be like, wow, this is much better. But don't listen to it in your studio. Listen to it elsewhere. Take it to the car. Make a mix version like that with everything zeroed out that you made the crazy boosts on your mix bus. Go to the car and tell me you don't like it better. I bet you will. And the reason you do is because now all of a sudden you get reality back. Anything is going to sound good in your studio the longer you listen to it. So, people get used to depression and then they just think their whole life is depressed because they're so used to it. People get used to anything. You could get used to having 6 meals a day. And then if you have 4, your body's starving. This is exactly the same thing. The body is going to be trained however you train it. That's why people who eat once a day, they train themselves to do that. If you've eaten 3 times a day and then you go to 1, you'll be starving until you get used to it. It's exactly the same thing. You're going to have to feel weird in your room thinking, wow, there's not enough low mids until you get used to it. But it's an overtime thing. And what I'm saying is you actually have to reset every song, in my opinion. You reset your idea by using some sort of a reference to rein you back in if you got too crazy. But I haven't had a situation yet that I couldn't rein in on the mix bus because it was too crazy. And sometimes it's not just the mix bus. Like I had to go to the bass track itself to tighten things up, or, I had to go to something to get rid of some harshness in the high end or whatever it was, like within the track. But on the mix bus, you can just do subtle tweaks to kind of match curves if you need to. And you'll be able to do that if you don't start by mixing into a ton of EQ. So biggest problem in the box people do is they do too much EQ to mix into on their mix bus. Take the EQ off, mix your greatest mix you could ever mix, then slight tweaks at the end to get it to match some sort of Get it a little closer to whatever it is you're listening to if you can't fix it within the mix. That's the way to go. As opposed to what I used to do in the analog hybrid world, you can get away with way more mixing into it. Because that's the thing. When you hear about what did Chris Lord Alge do or whatever, if I'm not mistaken, like Pultec style trick, boosted a ton, mix into it. A lot of guys did that who were in the hybrid world or analog. But don't do that if you're in the box. I'm telling you, it really doesn't work. It doesn't for me. Maybe it does for you. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. And I'm going to share this with you because I find it interesting. I'll probably give you two versions, the way it started out and then what I did to it, so you can hear an A and a B. But I hope you guys dug it. Questions, answers, throw it in there. Real world reference point, throw it into your headphones. Also, volume match. If you don't volume match the reference, and sometimes that means limiting or something to bring it up to level of where you're at if the reference is too quiet. But references are key. Level matched references are key. And then kind of basic, it doesn't have to be the exact style stuff. Like the thing I used was a funky song, but I'm really going for tightness, so I don't care. And I'm doing a live thing, and it didn't sound nothing like it. Mine has room in it. That's got nothing. It's totally dry. It's the driest recording of all time. But it still got me it got me to rein in some 300 that I needed to do, is what it did. And it got me to rein in the bass, which could mean substantial things. Like, I just want to explain what that is. If you've got a great sounding bass that's very balanced, you might not need to do that much. But because I had so much crazy booming lows, I had to use like a high pass filter at 80 hertz, set it like 18 dB per octave or something like that. I mean, I don't know exactly. I don't remember exactly, but I'll show you because it's in a session, so I might as well pull it up. But the point is, I had to do a ton down there to get rid of the boom. And then what I was doing with the bass, the plugins I had on there to kind of, it totally didn't, it doesn't sound like there's no bass. This mix is bass heavy, I would say. And I'm still 80 hertz is where the high pass filter set on a Pro Q3 at either 18 or 24 dB per octave. I think it's 18, but and a crazy high mid boost, like crazy. There's high mid boost is probably also like it bleeds into the low end. Like I do like a little 500 poke on a bass, like the nose, I call it, where it's kind of like the way Sting's bass sounded. I just like the way that sounds on a bass when it's live bass. But anyway, I don't want to go too long. This has already been crazy. Questions, comments, throw it in there. I hope this helps somebody. You guys got this.